Section 3 of Highways in Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3. I'd rather not go into the next week and a half in detail. I became known as the bridegroom who lost his bride, and between the veiled accusations and the half-covered snickers, life was pretty miserable. I talked to the police 3 times, first as a citizen asking for information and ending up as a complainant against party or parties unknown. The latter got me nowhere. Apparently the police had more lines out than the Grand Bank fishing fleet and were getting no more nibbles than they'd get in the Dead Sea. They admitted it. The day had gone when the police gave out news reports that an arrest was expected hourly, meaning that they were baffled. The police, with their fine collection of Psy-boys, were willing to admit when they were really baffled. I talked to telepaths who could tell me what I'd had for breakfast on the day I'd entered preschool classes, and espers who could sense the color of the clothing I wore yesterday. I've a poor color esper, primitive, so to speak. These guys were good, but no matter how good they were, Catherine Lewis had vanished as neatly as Ambrose Bierce. I even read Charles Fort, although I have no belief in the supernatural and rather faint faith in the hereafter. And people who enter the hereafter leave their remains behind for evidence. Having to face Catherine's mother and father, who came east to see me, made me a complete mental wreck. It is harder than you think to face the parents of a woman you loved and find that all you can tell them is that somehow you fouled your drive, cracked up, and lost their daughter. Not even dead for sure. Death, I think, we all could have faced. But this uncertainty was something that gnawed at the soul's roots and left it rotting. To stand there and watch the tears in the eyes of a woman as she asks you, "But can't you remember, son?" is a little too much, and I don't care to go into details. The upshot of it was, after about 10 days of lying awake nights and wondering where she was and why, watching her eyes peer out of a metal casting at me from a position sideways of my head, nightmares, either the one about us turning over and over and over, or Mrs. Lewis pleading with me only to tell her the truth, then having the police inform me that they were marking this case down as unexplained, I gave up. I finally swore that I was going to find her and return with her, or I was going to join her in whatever strange, unknown world she had entered. The first thing I did was to go back to the hospital in the hope that Dr. Thorndyke might be able to add something. In my unconscious ramblings, there might be something that fell into a pattern if it could be pieced together. But this was a failure, too. The hospital super was sorry, but Dr. Thorndyke had left for the Medical Research Center a couple of days before. Nor could I get in touch with him because he had a 6-week interim vacation and planned a long, slow jaunt through Yellowstone, with neither schedule nor forwarding addresses. I was standing there on the steps, hoping to wave down a cruising copter cab, when the door opened and a woman came out. I turned to look, and she recognized me. It was Miss Farrow, my former nurse. "Why, Mr. Cornell, what are you doing back here?" "Mostly looking for Thorndyke. He's not here." "I know. Isn't it wonderful, though? He'll get his chance to study for his scholarate now." I nodded glumly. "Yeah," I said. It probably sounded resentful, but it is hard to show cheer over the good fortune of someone else when your own world has come unglued. "Still hoping," she said. It was a statement and not a question. I nodded slowly. "I'm hoping," I said. "Someone has the answer to this puzzle. I'll have to find it myself. Everyone else has given up." "I wish you luck," said Miss Farrow with a smile. "You certainly have the determination." I grunted. It's about all I have." What I need is training. Here I am, a mechanical engineer, about to tackle the job of a professional detective and tracer of missing persons. About all I know about the job is what I've read. One gets the idea that these writers must know something of the job, the way they write about it. But once you're faced with it yourself, you realize that the writer has planted his own clues. Miss Farrow nodded. "One thing," she suggested. "Have you talked to the people who got you out from under your car yet?" "No, I haven't. The police talked to them and claimed they knew nothing. I doubt that I can ask them anything that the police have not satisfied themselves about." Miss Farrow looked up at me sideways. "You won't find anything by asking people who have never heard of you." I suppose not." A copter cab came along at that moment, and probably sensing my intention, he gave his horn a tap. I'd have liked to talk longer with Miss Farrow, but a cab was what I wanted, so with a wave I took it, and she went on down the steps to her own business. I had to pause long enough to buy a new car, but a few hours afterward I was rolling along the same highway with my Esper extended as far as I could in all directions. I was driving slowly, this time both alert and ready. I went past the scene of the accident slowly and shut my mind off as I saw the black burned patch. The block was still hanging from an overhead branch, and the rope that had burned off was still dangling, about 2 feet of it, looped through the pulleys and ending in a tapered, burned end. I turned left into a driveway toward the home of the Harrisons and went along a winding dirt road, growing more and more conscious of a dead area ahead of me. It was not a real dead zone, because I could still penetrate some of the region. But as far as really digging any of the details of the rambling Harrison house, I could get more from my eyesight than from any sense of perception. But even if they couldn't find a really dead area, the Harrisons had done very well in finding one that made my sense of perception ineffective. It was sort of like looking through a light fog, and the closer I got to the house, the thicker it became. Just about the point where the dead area was first beginning to make its effect tell, I came upon a tall, browned man of about 24 who had been probing into the interior of a tractor up to the time he heard my car. He waved, and I stopped. "Mr. Harrison?" "I'm Philip. And you are Mr. Cornell." "Call me Steve like everybody else," I said. "How'd you guess?" "Recognized you," he said with a grin. "I'm the guy that pulled you out." "Thanks," I said, offering a hand. He chuckled. "Steve, consider the hand taken and shook because I've enough grime to mess up a regiment." "It won't bother me," I said. "Thanks, but it's still a gesture, and I appreciate it, but let's be sensible. I know you can wash, but let's shake later. What can I do for you?" "I'd like a first-hand account, Phil." "Not much to tell. Dad and I were pulling stumps over about 1,000 feet from the wreck. We heard the racket. I am Esper enough to dig that distance with clarity, so we knew we'd better bring along the block and tackle. The tractor wouldn't go through, so we came on the double. Dad rigged the tackle and hoisted, and I took a running dive, grabbed, and hauled you out before the whole thing went whoosh. We were both lucky, Steve." I grunted a bit, but managed to nod with a smile. "I suppose you know that I'm still trying to find my fiancée." "I've heard tell," he said. He looked at me sharply. I'm a total blank as a telepath, like all Espers, but I could tell what he was thinking. "Everybody is convinced that Catherine was not with me," I admitted. "But I'm not. I know she was." He shook his head slowly. "As soon as we heard the screech of brakes and rubber, we esped the place," he said quietly. "We dug you, of course, but no one else. Even if she'd jumped as soon as that tree limb came into view, she could not have run far enough to be out of range. As for removing a bag, She'd have had to wait until the slam-bang was over to get it out, and by the time your car was finished rolling, Dad and I were on the way with help. She was not there, Steve. You're a goddamn liar. Philip Harrison did not move a muscle. He was blank telepathically. I was esping the muscles in his stomach under his loose clothing for that first tensing sign of anger, but nothing showed. He had not been reading my mind. I smiled thinly at Phil Harrison and shrugged. He smiled back sympathetically, but behind it I could see that he was wishing that I'd stop harping on a dead subject. I sincerely wish I could be of help, he said. In that he was sincere, but somewhere, someone was not, and I wanted to find out who it was. The impasse looked as though it might go on forever unless I turned away and left. I had no desire to leave. Not that Phil could help me, but even though this was a dead end, I was loath to leave the place because it was the last place where I had been close to Catherine. The silence between us must have been a bit strained at this point, but luckily we had an interruption. I perceived motion, turned and caught sight of a woman coming along the road toward us. "My sister," said Phil. "Marion." Marion Harrison was quite a girl. If I'd not been emotionally tied to Catherine Lewis, I'd have been happy to invite myself in. Marion was almost as tall as I am, a dark, brown-haired woman with eyes of a startling electricity-colored blue. She was about 22, young and healthy. Her skin was tanned toast brown so that the bright blue eyes fairly sparked out at you. Her red mouth made a pleasing blend with the tan of her skin, and her teeth gleamed white against the dark when she smiled. Insultingly, I made some complimentary but impolite mental observations about her figure, but Marion did not appear to notice. She was no telepath. "You're Mr. Cornell," she said. "I remembered you," she said quietly. "Please believe us, Mr. Cornell, when we extend our sympathy." "Thanks," I said glumly. "Please understand me, Miss Harrison. I appreciate your sympathy, but what I need is action and information and answers. Once I get those, the sympathy won't be needed." "Of course I understand," she replied instantly. "We are all aware that sympathy is a poor substitute. All the world grieving with you doesn't turn a stitch to help you out of your trouble. All we can do is to wish with you that it hadn't happened." "That's the point," I said helplessly. "I don't even know what happened." "That makes it even worse," she said softly. Marion had a pleasant voice, throaty and low, that sounded intimate even when talking about something pragmatic. "I wish we could help you, Steve." "I wish someone could." She nodded. "They asked me about it, too, even though I was not present until afterward. They asked me," she said thoughtfully, "about the mental attitude of a woman running off to get married. I told them that I couldn't speak for your woman, but that I might be able to speak for me, putting myself in the same circumstances." She paused a moment, and her brother turned idly back to his tractor and fitted a small end wrench to a bolt head and gave it a twist. He seemed to think that as long as Marion and I were talking, he could well afford to get along with his work. I agreed with him. I wanted information, but I did not expect the entire world to stop progress to help me. He spun the bolt and started on another, lost in his job while Marion went on. "I told them that your story was authentic, the one about the bridal nightgown." A very slight color came under the deep tan. "I told them that I have one too, still in its wrapper, and that someday I'd be planning marriage and packing a go-away bag with the gown shaken out and then packed neatly." I told them that I'd be doing the same thing no matter whether we were having a formal church wedding with a 4-alarm reception and all the trimmings, or a quiet elopement such as you were. I told them that it was the essentials that count, not the trimmings and the tinsel. My questioner's remark was to the effect that either you were telling the truth, or that you had esped a woman about to marry and identified her actions with your own wishes. I know which, I said with a sour smile. It was both. Marian nodded. Then they asked me if it were probable that a woman would take this step completely unprepared, and I laughed at them. I told them that long before Rhine, women were putting their nuptial affairs in order about the time the gentleman was beginning to view marriage with an attitude slightly less than loathing, and that by the time he popped the question, she'd been practicing writing her name as Mrs. and picking out the chinaware and prospective names for the children, and that if any woman had ever been so stunned by a proposal of marriage that she'd take off without so much as a toothbrush, no one in history had ever heard of her. Then you begin to agree with me? She shrugged. Please, she said in that low voice, don't ask me my opinion of your veracity. You believe it, but all the evidence lies against you. There was not a shred of woman trace anywhere along your course, from the point along the road where you first caught sight of the limb that threw you to the place where you piled up. Nor was there a trace anywhere in a vast circle, almost a half a mile they searched, from the crack-up. They had doctors of Psi digging for footprints, shreds of clothing, everything. Not a trace. "But where did she go?" I cried. And when I say cried, I mean just that. Marian shook her head very slowly. "Steve," she said in a voice so low that I could hardly hear her over the faint shrill of bolts being unscrewed by her brother. "So far as we know, she was never here. Why don't you forget her?" I looked at her. She stood there, poised and a bit tensed, as though she were trying to force some feeling of affectionate kinhood across the gap that separated us, as though she wanted to give me both physical and mental comfort, despite the fact that we were strangers on a 10-minute first meeting. There was distress in her face. "Forget her?" I ground out. "I'd rather die." "Oh, Steve, no." One hand went to her throat and the other came to fasten around my forearm. Her grip was hard. I stood there wondering what to do next. Marian's grip on my arm relaxed and she stepped back. I pulled myself together. "I'm sorry," I told her honestly. "I'm putting you through a set of emotional hurdles by bringing my problems here. I'd better take them away." She nodded very slowly. "Please go. But please come back, once you get yourself squared away, no matter how. We'd all like to see you when you aren't all tied up inside." Phil looked up from the guts of the tractor. "Take it easy, Steve," he said. "And remember that you do have friends here." Blindly, I turned from them and stumbled back to my car. They were a pair of very fine people, firm, upright. Marian's grip on my arm had been no weaker than her sympathy, and Phil's less emotional approach to my trouble was no less deep, actually. It was as strong as his good right arm, loosening the head bolts of a tractor engine with a small adjustable wrench. I'd be back. I wanted to see them again. I wanted to go back there with Catherine and introduce them to her. But I was definitely going to go back. I was quite a way toward home before I realized that I had not met the old man. I bet myself that Father Harrison was quite the firm, active patriarch. End of Chapter 3.